Hey guys,
Nope.
welcome to the Thursday show.
This is my show.
This is Chelsea. I'm your host, Adam Zalewski.
Hey everyone, this is Pastor Chelsea and you're watching the Thursday show. And this week I have a very special guest, my husband, Adam Zalewski. Hi Adam.
Hello everybody.
He's super excited to be here, as you can tell. But we thought, last week was Valentine's Day, and actually last Sunday we got the honor of teaching Pastor Dan's class, and it was kind of funny because Pastor Dan's class is all about family and marriage, and we were I think we were the youngest married couple in the room, like with the least experience
The
under
least
our belt.
experienced couple
Yes.
teaches the class.
Yes. But what I think is really cool about honestly just learning, or especially learning about marriage, is that I think everybody can glean something from everybody. So we figured for today's episode, we're going to talk through some of the good advice, some of the bad advice that we've received in marriage, and maybe it'll be something that helps you guys out too. So our class that we taught, our key thought was how your marriage is your first ministry. If you're married, if you have kids, either way, your marriage is the foundation really on which everything else is built. It impacts kids if you have kids, it impacts even the people you work with, because I know on the days like if we're, the very rare days where we've fought and I go into work, it impacts the people that I work with, it impacts your family, it impacts everybody. And so it's really important to have conversations like this, because if your marriage isn't in a healthy spot, it's going to affect everything else in your life.
And I would say your capacity to serve your church or serve in ministry, it's definitely going to affect that when things are not going well at the home front.
So let's talk through some of the specific bad advice and then the good advice that we've received. I think one of the big things I remember, and this is more maybe like growing up, but I remember a lot of people thinking that there was only one person out there that you could marry, the one mentality. And I think that's kind of dangerous, because if you think that there's only one person out there that you could marry, then let's say you get married and you have a fight with your spouse. Well, then in that moment, it's really easy to think, oh, I must not have married the right one, because the one would never cause me such grief. But if we flip that around and recognize that, let's be honest, there's probably, a few hundred people that I could have married or that you could have married. When we flip it around and realize that we make a choice to marry our spouse, then when the going gets tough and, you do something that makes me really upset, then I remember, yes, but I chose you, and you're the person that I'm choosing to love even in that moment when it's hard. And I think having that choice really helps us have healthier marriages.
And I would say even on the other side of marriage, like before you get married, if you have that mentality that there's only one person out there, I think it's very easy to get so paralyzed with fear that you're gonna make the wrong decision and choose the wrong person, and then your life is just going to be ruined forever. And I think that's kind of a dangerous mentality, because you'll probably get that analysis paralysis when it comes to dating and choosing someone. And on top of that, I don't think it's a very healthy thing to think that God's will is like this tightrope that we need to be on. And if you deviate from that tightrope, you're like out of the will of God, and then you're gonna have all kinds of trouble in your life. Where I think we need to trust God's sovereignty, and that He is not limited by perhaps your poor choices or your good choices. Like, He's not going to leave you, He's not going to forsake you. So whatever happens, He's going to use that. And so that's why I think the one mentality is not so healthy.
The next piece of bad advice that I would say that we've heard is he'll change. Assuming that you could change your spouse when he does something that you don't like. I mean, that obviously never happens with Adam, but just generally speaking. And I think that's really obvious why that one's dangerous, is assuming that it's your job to change somebody or assuming that change will come in a certain area of your life. Now, I think what is important is recognizing that if we're both being healthy individuals, we should both be trying to grow. And I think it's kind of cool that looking back, I wouldn't say either of us are really the same people that we were 2.5 years ago when we got married, but in a good way. I think we should both be growing, but I can't force you to change.
Yeah, I think, any kind of change that happens in a person has got to be intrinsically motivated. It's got to come from inside them rather than, your partner nagging you about how you do something like this and it bothers them. I don't think that's going to really encourage someone to change for the better. And yeah, so I think it's just learning when, maybe you're dating or you're considering getting married or anything like that, you got to accept that person for who they are, mistakes and all, and
not assume that you're going to change those things out of them.
Yeah, and hopefully, both, if you guys are both in a healthy spot, you're going to be growing together as individuals and a couple, so that, maybe some of those things you can work through.
The next piece of bad marriage advice I would say that I've heard is happy wife, happy life. Adam, why do you think this piece of marriage advice maybe isn't the healthiest?
I just think it's a little bit one-sided. Not that there's like a battle or anything, but I think marriage needs to be a team effort. And so if you have only one party that's happy, it's not healthy for the other party, regardless of if it's the husband or the wife. Both parties need to be happy in order for the marriage to be healthy. And when you come to a crossroads and you need to, and you have a disagreement, you have to try to come to some kind of middle ground. I mean, I don't want to say compromise necessarily, because I think...
But there can be healthy compromises.
Yeah, I just think a lot of people connotate that's like a bad thing to have compromise, but yeah, I think it's more of a team effort to try and solve issues and treating those problems that you have as a third party, where it's like, okay, we have this problem, how can we solve it together, instead of you always do this or you never do this. Those are kind of the accusatory phrases that puts the other person on the defensive pretty quick.
Yeah, I remember we heard that in a marriage conference. I think it was even our first year, from Terry Linhart at Bethel, and he was talking about in marriage how often, we'll say this is me and this is you, and when we have a fight, we're going at it like this, and I see you do this and you're the problem. But a healthier way when you're in those spaces is to see your problem as like this third entity, so that then both of you can work to resolve whatever that problem is. And that's been really helpful, but it's still really hard.
Yeah.
Where sometimes
it's easier said than done.
Yes, sometimes I just kind of want to be mad at you. It's silly and selfish of me, but sometimes I just kind of want to stay in that place. But I think that that kind of goes back to us growing individually, helps us both mature, so that then when we have those conflicts, then we can try to handle them in a mature kind of way.
And by the way, she really can't stay mad at me for very long, so.
Of course not. You're so sweet and adorable and never make any mistakes. But even going back to before, I think that verse that says to submit to one another in love, that for me is, I think, the core of what marriage should be. And it sounds really nice and pretty, but actually living it out is really hard, because submitting to you in love means, sometimes I just want to sit on the couch because I'm tired, but if you ask me to come take a look at something, I come and take a look at it because I know it's important to you. And that has to be going both ways. So that whole happy wife, happy life, where that advice is wrong is that it shouldn't just be one individual that, directs the ship of the emotions. It should be when both of us are in a happy place, submitting to one another in love. That's when life around us is a much happier place.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to the choice. I mean, love is not this like feeling that you have that's overwhelming, that makes everything easy all the time. Love is more about loving that person even when it's hard. and you make a choice to love that person. And so that's what it's all about, I think.
Our last piece of bad marriage advice that we've heard is probably one of the biggest ones as far as practicality for us living out, but the piece of advice that says don't go to bed angry. Now, I know some of you are going to be like, no, that's scriptural, and get all ready to fight me on this. But for us, we found that there have been times, very rare occasions, where we've been in fights at night usually. And a lot of times our conflicts that happen at night, whether it's, with a spouse or with other family members, honestly just happen because our brain is tired from the day. We only have so much mental energy in a given day. And by the end of the day, you're left kind of at the bottom of the tank of the energy you have. So it's really easy for little things to aggravate you or to turn into bigger problems. And so we've found for us, when we're trying to resolve those things at bedtime or in the evening, it usually seems to just get worse and worse, and it feels like we can't find a resolution in that moment.
Yeah, and I would premise that for us, this is true at least. It's not necessarily like a one-size-fit-all advice, but for us, we've noticed that we just need to pause. We need to pause the discussion and come back to it later. And I think it can be really hard for some people, because some people probably wouldn't be able to fall asleep at all.
It is hard. It is hard for me to fall asleep in those moments. But I think what helps is knowing that we're coming back to it later.
Yeah, and a lot of times we'll come back to the argument later, and things are resolved very quickly because we can think clearly about whatever the conflict is and come to that happy middle ground.
Yeah. So those have been some of the bad advice that we've heard over the years, but we've found that even sometimes with not the greatest advice, there's always something you can learn from it, in a way you can turn it into something that helps your marriage. So hopefully some of those have helped you, whether you're married, whether you're single and planning on getting married, or whether you have no intention of ever getting married, but you just want to be a human in the world, getting along with the people around you. So for those of you who are out there who are married, I would love to hear some of your good or bad marriage advice you've received. So would you drop those in the comments? Tell us, we're still pretty young and pretty early on in this marriage. I would love to hear some of the wisdom from those of you who are out there. So tell us good advice that we can learn from and glean from for the many years of marriage experience out there in the intranet world. So whether it's from the advice we've shared today or the advice that you're going to read in the comments, we hope this encourages you, for those of you who are married out there, that your marriage is your first ministry. And let this be a place that then you and your marriage can grow deeper and closer together as hubby and wifey. The mugs actually have nothing in them because we don't drink coffee. But I figured, why not use them for something, right?
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
Well, thanks for joining us today on the Thursday show. I look forward to seeing you next week with a really important conversation. We'll actually be interviewing Travis Wolf from our counseling center about mental health. So check that out next week. And until then, have a great Thursday. See you next week.
Bye.
Thanks.
That was so painful.
Was it really?
Oh.
Really that painful?